Hey guys, welcome back. Elyon here, and today we're talking about a classic of mine. Now, this wasn't like the first, well, I guess you could say this is the first male OC I had. Technically, kind of, not really, but mostly, yes. Which is true, because originally, like I said, Jade was my first OC, but my first, like, actual male OC that I was messing with, or coming up with, was Colus, the Grim Reaper. Now, he didn't start as the Grim Reaper. Originally, Colus himself was just a courier of sorts, smuggler. He lived in a not so nice neighborhood, and there was a bit of a disparity between the rich and the poor, i.e., the rich stayed on one side of town in his city, like exclusively, like it was walled off. You could not get in there without like certain things in advance. And then the poor had to kind of just survive on their own. It was very dystopian in a sense, but that was also due to the fact that I made him back in like high school, and I remember back at the time in during said high school days, the popular things were shit like Hunger Games, Maze Runner, all the like young teen dramas and stuff like that that were also based on books. So think of like the Lightning Thief, etc., etc., etc. There were so many of those. I mean, hell, there still is some, and I think they even made like a recent Lightning Thief Netflix show. I haven't watched it, but I heard that was a thing. But anyways, I'm getting off topic. Colus himself was one of a few different OCs that I was putting together for a different story. Nothing to do with Jade or anything, but it was more along the lines of when I first got him or came up with him, I was like, okay, I kind of want to mess around with mythology. And this was why I first started playing like stuff like Dante's Inferno, God of War, for myself, obviously, not just watching my dad play it. So I started getting fascinated with more and more mythology stuff. And the funny thing is, religion, I should look into that too, because I'm not going to say religion is like mythology. It kind of is. But in the sense of like, it's fascinating stuff to learn about. Like, at the end of the day, they're just really cool stories to learn too. So the idea with Colus was kind of similar to the idea of Dante's Inferno, of a person traveling through hell. But how it started was Colus got a job from an old lady. This old lady was essentially what's the word? Like those people that make like counterfeit. She's a counterfeiter. She basically can forge documents, forge a whole bunch of other stuff. And Colus grew up essentially never really knowing anything outside of the bad in people. Like everyone he's ever been around, he's just like, yeah, no, humans are trash. Everything sucks. Like, I don't like any of these people. I don't trust any of these people. I'll probably die in a pit somewhere one day. But, he got to the age he is now, which I think at the time was going to be, I think it was like 16, but I think I aged him up later in the story due to just, actually, no, he was 16. When I first came up with him, yeah. And so the idea of Colus was just like, he had a friend. And that's even then that's loosely. It's more like a partner in crime kind of thing. It was a female associate of his. And while they were like cool with each other, it was never really anything more than that. So when the idea of him going to the counterfeiter was just her being like, because he just needed some fake documents to like drop something off for a separate job. And she was like, okay, here's what we're gonna do then. She gave him a box and she said, this small box, I need you to take it to this area. But the thing was, the area was in the waterway. And he's like, well, I can't go to the waterway because it's like a little canal around the city that leads out into the ocean. He's like, if I go anywhere over there, I'm going to get shot. She's like, I already got someone that can take you. You just need to drop this package off to this person. His name was like Lucas. Do that, and not only will you get a good amount of money to live off of, but I can get you to the other side of the city, the good side, where you can be taken in by, like, my family. Essentially, she's saying, like, hey, you can go live with these rich folks. He's like, why would I do that? They if they didn't come get you, why would they get me? And she essentially just chalks it up to, like, hey, it's business. They might see you as a charity case, but they're not monsters. Or at least my people aren't. You know, they help look after you, or at least get you a job, so you don't have to risk your life doing all this stuff. So he agrees to go do it. He finds this little boatman, and he hops on the bus. I said bus. Hops on the boat. Sorry. And then the guy essentially smuggles him past the canal, and he goes into a specific tunnel. And as he starts going through there, Colus sits up and he has a few instructions. One, don't open the box yourself. Two, the only person who should be looking or touching that box is Lucas, the guy you're supposed to be bringing it to. So it's like, all right, cool. He gets to the the end of the thing with him, and the boatman just says, I'll be back at this time. If you're not here, when I'm here, I'm leaving. And then you gotta find your own way back. So, which essentially just means be back in the morning. And so Colus leaves and starts going to walk down the path of dropping off the box. And he's essentially going deeper into a cave. Now, typically, you'd be like, isn't this a little suspicious? Oh no, don't get it twisted. He is incredibly paranoid about what he's walking into, because in his mind he's like, how do I know I'm not walking into an ambush or a cult or some like crazy setup? But like, how do I know she's not playing me? How do I know I'm not gonna walk into a firing squad because they think I'm the counterfeiter? Because again, the rich don't like the poor coming through, especially if it's with illegitimate paperwork. But the counterfeiter is a really good counterfeiter. So when she says she can do stuff like that, she can do stuff like that. But at the same time, it starts dawning on him a little bit like, but why? Why specifically does she need me to help drop off her stuff? Like, she could have had anyone do this. But he just says, like, I'm already here, alright? So I might as well see it through. Then knocks on this big, like, metal gate. Think of like a flat gate that just like slides up and down. Can't see what's on the other side, and and pretty much the light starts dissipating from the light that's left outside the deeper he gets into the cave. So he opens it up, or it opens up in front of him, and there's like this hooded man. And between him and the hooded man is like a hotel hallway with doors on either side. So he starts walking with them, because the guy just says, yeah, I'm here to escort you where you're supposed to go. Don't talk to nobody. Don't bother nobody. Don't go knocking on these doors. All right? Like, we're going straight there. That's it. But the elevator's out. So they have to take the stairs. Walk down the first floor. And not really a problem at first. But there's these 3 big guard dogs. And they immediately start getting hostile towards Colus because, they don't like strangers. The hooded man essentially just kind of like, at first he doesn't acknowledge it until one of the dogs tries to bite his throat out. Then he steps in between Colus and the dogs and starts fighting them off. And he just tells them, get to the second floor. Hurry up, like, run. So Colus books it with the box and everything. And later on, comes across the hooded man, but he saw him get jumped essentially by 3 big ass like pit bulls or Rottweilers, like just big, scary looking dogs. And he's like, how come you don't got no marks on you or anything? He's like, don't worry about it. And he's like, okay. They keep going again. And then they go to the second floor, and you can just hear like a lot of stuff going on, like a lot of freaky noises on the other side of these doors. Men, women. I was about to say animals, but like, no, I don't want to go that far. I mean, technically in the story, it's kind of explained once it makes more sense, but it's like it's just like a bunch of weird stuff. And as he's walking through, someone stops him to ask him about the box. Like, it's just this like half naked chick, just like in a robe, just leaning onto the wall. And Colus, he basically just tells her to fuck off, but that's where he made the mistake. Because the second he interacted, she kind of looks at him again and gives him like another once over and goes like, "You're new here, aren't you?" And he just starts going like, "Go away." But then she starts getting kind of pushy about it and goes like, "No, no, no, something's up here." And she gets closer. And then obviously, like, the hooded man pushes her back and just like bashes her upside the head with this stick, like this makeshift stick he just kind of pulls out of nowhere and just tells her to like go away. So she starts staring at him again, like, "Oh, this ain't over." So he's confused. He's like, "What was all that about?" He's like, "I told you don't talk to nobody, just keep walking." He's like, all right, cool, cool, cool. Won't do it again." So they start traveling a little bit further. They start making it towards the end of the second floor, but it seems like the walk is going a lot further than the destination looks. Like they're walking in circles despite it being a straight line. And Colus starts picking up on this. He's like, "Ain't no way." Like it feels like in his mind, he's like, it's like I'm walking. It's like I'm trying to walk up a pair of stairs that don't go anywhere, and it's just like me walking up in a loop. So he stops and asks the guy. He's like, "Hey, something's not right here. Like, seriously, what's going on here?" And then the guy figures out. The hooded man looks around too and kind of goes like, "Oh, either I lost track of time, or we're in an illusion." And so Colus is like, "Okay, this is like, I ain't got no clue what's going on here, but this is like weird." So he kind of just like tries to post up on the wall and think something over because he's like, none of this is making sense. And then immediately falls through the wall, and the hooded man snatches him up and like catches him. And then Colus looks around for like the briefest second because the hotel he was in is literally not there. Like it's nothing but fire and brimstone. He essentially looks around and sees hell. And he goes like, "Okay, what the fuck?" And he gets pulled back in. But the problem is because he saw through the illusion when he got to the other side, the rest of it starts breaking down on him. So what essentially was happening was that some of the demons, when Colus got their attention by speaking to them, started putting him in a loop, trying to get him to slip up and fall over. But once he breaks out of it and starts seeing everything for what it is, he's like, "Okay, seriously, what the hell is going on here?" And then they get attacked by that dog again. Except it's not just three big dogs. It's one big dog with three heads. I'm sure you can guess which one that is. And they attack him again. Except this time, like I said, the illusion is gone, so Colus actually starts freaking out a bit. He's like, "Shit, I gotta go." So he starts running towards like the elevator, or the stairs specifically to go to the next floor. And while he's doing that, the hooded man tries to follow with him, but he was more focused on the dog than Colus was. So he gets into a fight, and he gets knocked back at one point, and the dog starts trying to chase after. Like he essentially knocks him into the wall and then tries to chase after Colus. And as he's doing that, Colus sees the stick on the floor and kind of picks it up to defend himself with, which it's a big ass stick, but he's kind of just like, "I mean, I don't know what I'm gonna do with this, but it's better than my bare hands here." They're like, "That's a big ass dog. What am I supposed to do?" So he starts swatting at him, trying to get him to leave. But as he picks it up, the dog kind of just stops and looks at him, and then kind of just walks back off like nothing happened. And while he's confused about the whole thing, the hooded man looks at him again and goes like, "Oh, I don't think you know what you just did." And so he looks at him, he kind of just goes like, like, "Hey, you should keep going downstairs. I'm gonna sit right here for a minute." And Colus is confused, but he can't really he finds that he can't put the stick down. And like he looks at it and goes like, "I don't think I want to drop this just yet." So he decides to keep it like, "Fuck it, it's a weapon. I don't have anything else. If anything, I could whack something over the head with it or throw it at somebody and run." So he takes a stick with him, and if he finds that it kind of has a little sling around it, so throws it over his shoulder, starts going back downstairs. And as he's going to head to the third floor, he gets stopped on the way again. Except this time, the lady that he saw before looks a little bit different. Like, her body looks less raggedy, her face looks a lot clearer, cleaner, and she has this, like, air, she has, like, this aroma about her, like, this real sweet scent. And so she introduces herself as Sisyphine, Lady Sisyphine. And she starts going on this big spiel about how she's a big deal with around here, and if he wants to get in her good graces, he's gonna have to offer her something. Colus literally just looks at her again and kind of just goes like, "Yeah, no, fuck off," and then walks past her. She doesn't take too kindly to that at first, so she starts trying to attack him until he points the stick at her again and says, "All right, seriously, lady, like, I don't know who you are, but I will beat the shit out of you if you don't back up." And she notices the box, so she asks what's inside of it. And he said, and obviously he's like, "This ain't for you. I gotta make a delivery to floor 7. So she gets curious and goes like, "Okay, why don't I go with you?" And at first he just says no and leaves. And as he's traveling further and further down the floors, he starts meeting more and more people. He meets a goblin at one point and has to beat him in a game of cards. Then he meets and see, the problem with this is I've only got art for certain characters right now, and that's what pisses me off, because I really wanted the full set at some point, but I only got like 3 or 4 of them now. I gotta get like the full set of people. It really bothers me that I don't have it yet. Yeah, there was a crazed Spartan warrior he has to get past as well, going to one floor, and then another floor after that, he runs into a woman called Isamore, who is actually pretty familiar with Lady Sisyphine, and Isamore is a fallen angel, and she is one of Hell's generals, so kind of a big deal. And then he gets to the final floor, and who does he run into but the devil? And because they're the only ones really in the room, he kind of just goes like, "I guess I'm supposed to bring this to you." Because he's asking for someone named Lucas, and obviously his name was Lucifer, so Colus put 2 and 2 together and went like, "Ah, well, that makes sense." But he kind of looked at her like, "All right, devil devil you don't. Here, all right, I'm leaving." And then that's when the devil opens the box and pulls out a soul. Specifically, the soul of the old lady, because she knew at some point that she was going to get caught and killed by the government or the rich people or basically anyone, because once they tracked it back to her, because it's not like the people she gave the stuff to were known to be loyal, they would have found her eventually. And she knows she is not the best person in the world and that she was bound to go to hell at some point. So she figured what she could do is offer herself early as a kind of like a welcome gift of sorts, so she could get comfortable there by the time she gets there. And also, that he'd go a bit easier on her once she got there. It didn't really work because he kind of just like pops it into his mouth and eats it afterwards like a snack. And then when Colus talks about leaving, he kind of just looks at it and goes like, "Oh yeah, no. This is a one-way trip. And also, you can't leave now anyways, because he's like, because of what you're holding." And he looks at and he was confused at first until he shows him the stick. So he grabs the stick from him and swipes outward with it. Like, he moves his hand like a moon shape, like an arc, and like a crescent shape. And as he does, it reveals that he's holding the Grim Reaper's scythe. So he's like, "Yeah, when you took the scythe from the Reaper, you essentially passed the torch." Because how it goes with the Grim Reaper scythe is, you can't really kill the Grim Reaper, but all the power from the scythe is really, really strong. But if the Reaper wants to pass on and go to a different, and like basically die, someone has to take the scythe. Willingly or unwillingly, doesn't matter. If you take the scythe and they choose to grant you the title of Reaper, you become the Reaper. That's what was technically shielding Colus from the demons at first when he got the stick, was that the energy coming off the stick essentially cloaked him a little bit. Now, if they got close enough, like how Sisyphine did, she could sniff him out and realize that he was actually a living soul. But how it goes typically is the Reaper himself is supposed to already be, well, they're supposed to be alive. You have to, and they have to have just died. But since Colus didn't die, he essentially becomes like half Reaper or a pseudo Reaper of sorts, where he can draw upon the powers of the scythe, but the problem is the more he does it, the more of himself he loses into the scythe. Like his soul gets transferred into it bit by bit, and it's not really renewable. So he can still use it as an actual weapon, but if he wanted to like use some of the things that the scythe gives him access to, like teleportation, instant death touch, which is literally a thing. He can just turn his hand all bony, and if he touches something that can die, it will. It doesn't work on like robots and shit, but any person, anything with a soul, boom. But it's also a thing of like, okay, if he doesn't sacrifice his soul, he has to give up something to use the powers, which can be his own memories. And so, obviously, the devil kind of has a laugh about it, like, "Ha, you just got suckered." He doesn't take too kindly to that, and immediately tries to fight the devil, which goes about as well as you think it is, because the devil just zaps him away to be tortured and kind of just takes the scythe from him, because he's like, "Look, I mean, you're not dead. I won't have you killed, but you might wish I did by the time you come back to this." So he sits around, he waits for a while. And I say a while in terms of like people time, because outside of that, he was only there on the trip for a few days, but he was tortured or like sent away by Satan for about 2 months. Which is, I mean, 60 days in the grand scheme of things is not that long, but it's long enough when you're in hell being like tormented. So after like 2 months, he kind of brings them out and goes like, "So did we learn our lesson?" He's like, and Colus is obviously broken at that point. He's like he can barely talk, but he's like, "Yeah, yeah." So he gives him back the scythe and says, "All right, let's go introduce you to like some of my people and some of yours." So he takes them to like essentially the war room with all of his generals to like basically run down what he needs him to do, because as he says is, "Look, it's a not a good job to be the Reaper. You have to reap souls. Doesn't matter how they died, if they think it's fair or not. You find them, you bring them here. But if you want a little boon to help you out with this stuff, as it goes, you're not the only one who leads lost souls back here. Cerberus will snatch them out, which is the dog, obviously. Angels will lead the living to heaven, while demons will drag some of the dead to hell." He's like, "I want you right now, when you're not doing that, to hunt down these stray demons and bring them back to me, because they've been out of hell for way too long and they refuse to come back, and I cannot set foot in the wood of the living right now unless it's through an avatar, and even then, I don't have the same powers I would while I'm in hell. So you bring them to me, I punish them, you get something back for it." So once he kind of just explains the thing, Colus gets his scythe back. Once he does, he's like, "Oh, okay, cool." The second his back is turned, he immediately shoves it through the back of his skull and his scythe stabs out Satan's eye, which he then mounts onto the scythe like an actual accessory, and it actually does charge up the scythe, but it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, he gets access to like demonic powers that the scythe doesn't necessarily have, but at the same time, the more he uses those powers, the more it corrupts his soul, and also because it's literally the devil's eye, Satan gets to watch him all the time, and basically can keep tabs on him wherever he goes. Which, yeah, he does start sending people after him for that. Kind of like take my eye, bitch. I'm gonna send demons after you. They might not kill you, but they gonna fuck you up. because obviously the devil was pissed after that. But he agrees to start doing his job. But as he starts leaving, he says, "There's a few people I think would actually make this job a little bit simpler." Because obviously the devil has his own plans for Colus, because he needs him to actually get corrupted. That's why he doesn't really try to like immediately get him after he takes his eye. He kind of just, because whatever gets cut out or stabbed or like pierced with the Reaper's scythe, like anything that gets cut, like if he decapitates someone, you can't just reattach their head. Even if you can, same thing if you have any kind of limbs. It doesn't matter if you can regrow your body part from any part of your body. Like if, like let's say you had Deadpool levels of regeneration, it wouldn't matter. Once he cuts, if you cut someone's arm off with it, they just can't grow that arm back no more. They can't grow out a new arm over that old arm and be like, okay, cool. No. Everything that arm was, from its soul, from the soul attached to it to the bones and everything else, is just gone. You cannot bring it back. So yeah, the devil basically just doesn't have an eye anymore. That being said, Colus convinces him to essentially let him form a team of other demons to hunt some of the bigger bads, because he's not used to fighting demons yet. And also, you know, they could spread their own little brand of corruption amongst the living, because while he does think the world is still very shitty, he doesn't really care what happens to it, to the point where he goes like, you know what? Have fun. So he goes back, collects his rewards from the old lady, and instead of actively going himself, he sends his friend over there in his stead. Then he goes back to his neighborhood, goes back to where he lived, and essentially just kind of sits there for a while and ponders what to do next. He goes like, look, I'm going to be here for a while. I'm going to be here for a good long while. I need to start making plans. I need to figure out what it is I am going to do. And then while he's doing that, everyone else in his group has their own reasons for being there. The Goblin wants to make as much money as possible. The Spartan wants to be like the best fighter out there, so he starts doing like underground tournaments and fight clubs. Now, yeah, the demons are powerful while they're there, but they lose their powers over time the longer they're out of hell, unless they constantly drain people's like life essence or souls, or have some means of replenishing their strength. Otherwise, they have to go back to hell. And then if they get killed, they just get sent back to hell. But if they get killed by like holy weapons or weapons with actual magical abilities, that can actually kill them. I.e., like, same thing, like if Colus used a scythe on any of them and like ended them. Isamori wants to redeem herself in the eyes of God so she can go back to heaven. Sisyphine wants to steal Colus's soul when he's at the height of his power as a Reaper, and also get him as a servant, because she's actually not a big deal in hell. She's actually a handmaiden. But she thinks, you know, with the power boost, she could really have what she wants. So she starts trying to influence him too. But he doesn't really have any interest in people, actually, at all. So he's kind of just like, meh. And the whole time he's doing this, he's trying not to, like, lose what little bit of himself he still has to these weapons. So he's trying to have hope in a very shitty situation. And that's kind of where his story went for a while. I haven't really done too much with him outside of that. I occasionally get pieces of art from him here and there, because, you know, I still think his design is pretty simple and cool, and I like his eyes and the little face scar. Face scar, though, I kind of got from Yugo from Bloody Roar. The hair and the eyes originally was because I used to play Xenoverse. I made Snow look like this originally. I gave him black hair and purple eyes before I gave him white hair and red eyes. So I kind of just transferred the colors over to Colus. And honestly, I like the idea of people fighting with weapons like a scythe. Like, I didn't realize how cool it was, so I started playing Dante's Inferno, but the idea of a scythe that could wield into multiple different variations of weapons, like a spear and daggers and whatnot, I like the idea that he can break it up and wield it. Think of like fucking Tanya's staff from Mortal Kombat 1, which you can break it off to like little nunchuck variations and all this other shit. Like, I just like the idea like that, because then you can just make it, you know, sky's the limit with this kind of stuff. I really should continue his story, though.